Joining me right now is former U.S. Ambassador to Saudi Arabia under President George W. Bush and the author of the book Desert Diplomat, Robert Jordan. Ambassador, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for joining us.
Hi, Maria.
So we've got all of these comments from the Turkish government, and Turkey, as you just heard, is saying that Saudi operatives beat, drugged, killed, and dismembered a dissident Saudi journalist. This from Turkish officials. Is there any reason why we should not believe Turkish officials?
Well, the Turks have some animosity and difficulties with the Saudis from time to time, but I think in this case we probably ought to be inclined to believe them. A lot depends on what they can show our investigators in terms of the forensic evidence. Clearly there has been a cover-up at the consulate by the Saudis. They brought in cleaning crews. They've apparently painted over walls. So that's obviously a sign of guilt in some ways, even to have done that and destroy the crime scene. I think there is every likelihood that the Turkish comments are accurate.
What should the United States do about it at this point?
Well, we need to find out how much Crown Prince Salman, Mohammed bin Salman, actually knew about this. I don't fully buy into the notion that if he didn't know about it, it's okay. It's not okay. This was a team of assassins. This was a forensic doctor who was part of the team, bringing along with him a bone saw. They were only in the consulate for 2 hours. That is not the kind of lengthy interrogation you would expect under peaceable terms. So I think there pretty clearly was a hit squad that came in, many of whom have been documented to have close ties to Crown Prince Mohammed. So I think we've got to get to the bottom of that. And if Mohammed, for some odd reason, didn't know about it ahead of time, then you have to ask the question, how much is he actually in control of the kingdom? This would have been a major decision by their government, and one that I can't imagine he would not have been closely attached to.
So they were only in there for 2 hours. That's an important point that you raise. Tell me a little about Jamal Khashoggi, if you know anything about him. I mean, there's sort of a debate on who he was. Was he an activist or a journalist? Was he a member of the Muslim Brotherhood? What's your take?
I knew him and met with him a number of times when I was ambassador. He was a peaceful individual, never someone who would foment activist dissent in a violent way. He was not a threat to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He had opinions which he expressed, some of which were critical of the human rights violations that I think we've all criticized within Saudi Arabia. At the same time, he was complimentary from time to time of some of the reforms that this new Crown Prince had been undertaking. So it's a mixed message there. Certainly not someone who was an activist in the sense of trying to bring down the regime or foment revolution.
There's a debate on how to respond this morning on the U.S.'s part. Yeah. I guess one of the big disappointments here is that there was a notion that Mohammed bin Salman was sort of the last hope for the world to stabilize the Middle East, stabilize the region in the face of the terrorism coming out of Iran. So putting aside this incident, should the U.S. cut ties with the Saudis?
This is an argument that we wrestle with all the time with the Saudis. I wrestled with it when I was ambassador there right after 9/11. And I think where you come out is there's an alliance there because we have common interests. We need to preserve that the best we can, but you can't forgive certain kinds of conduct, such as the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. So there have to be consequences. You can actually do both. After 9/11, I had to get in the face of the Saudis, along with George Tenet, Colin Powell, and others, and urge them, demand of them that they do better in fighting terrorism. I think this is the time for a tough talk with the Saudis. They are not the senior partner in this relationship. We have to have them, but they also need to have us, and I think we shouldn't give up that leverage.
So tough talk, does that include something done in terms of the Magnitsky Act? Explain that. Or yes. do we reverse the partnership in terms of selling the arms? I mean, the arms sales, $100 billion. The president, it seems, reluctant to go that far. Is he right?
I think he's given up some leverage by telegraphing that ahead of time. I think he could have been a little more nuanced about it in the sense of saying everything's on the table. If you want our arms, then we're going to have some better understanding of what your conduct in the region is going to be. I think the Magnitsky Act is a very important act, which of course requires the government, if notified by Congress, to conduct an investigation into any extrajudicial killing or torture. That's exactly what this appears to be, and so I think Congress is right to be demanding that the administration do this investigation and then certify whether or not the Saudis are guilty of that violation. There's other avenues on the table, I think, as well. Certainly not attending this investment conference next week is important. You need to send a message that the international business community will not stand for this kind of conduct, and there will be consequences in the private sector as well.
Yes, very important comments that you're making. Let me ask you about the Saudi influence in Silicon Valley. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that the kingdom is now the single largest investor for U.S. startups. In an article titled "Saudi Money Flows into Silicon Valley and with it Qualms," President Trump also commenting on the economic relationship with Saudi Arabia in an interview with Fox Business's Trish Regan last night. Watch this.
They made the largest order in the history of our country for outside of our country for weapons, for any kinds of military weapons, missile systems, ships. They're buying
from us.
From us. $110 billion they're purchasing. It's 500,000 jobs, American jobs. Everything's made here.
So you make a good point that maybe the president's giving away too much, use it as leverage. But what about all this money flowing into Silicon Valley and in business in general in the U.S.?
Well, I think the boards of directors and shareholders of these companies have to be pretty nervous right now. It's not good for their reputation to be seen as being in the pocket of a country that is engaged in such horrendous human rights violations as this appears to be. And by the way, others like the war in Yemen, the detention of dissidents within Saudi Arabia, sentencing some of them to death, kidnapping the Prime Minister of Lebanon. So this is part of a terrible trail, really, of conduct that I think businesses in the U.S. have really got to take a close look at to see if they really want to be tarred with this kind of a brush.
Do you think we will actually get details and find out what happened here, Ambassador?
I think the Turks have possession of a lot of information, a lot of evidence. What is leaked out appears circumstantially to be very grave. And so my hope is they will come clean themselves, they will be transparent about it, and we'll get some resolution of this. I don't have much faith in the Saudis investigating themselves.
All right, we will leave it there. Really an interesting angle that all this Saudi money has gone into Silicon Valley, because you see a company like Google, for example, walking away from doing business with the Pentagon, and yet money flowing there and then also doing business with China. Something to watch. Ambassador, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Maria.
Ambassador Robert Jordan joining us there.